I got this email from a listener that I wanted to record video on because I've been asked this a few times, and I have some friends that pay a little bit too much attention to the mainstream, and while they are considered what you would say is a little awake, they're going through that waking up process where they don't reach that epiphany, which is above, that I've come to. It took me 2 years during the pandemic to get there, so I understand this. But I want to record this video to help some people that are stuck in these, I would say, lower forms of consciousness, lower forms of thinking, because they just haven't gotten there yet. You haven't gotten there yet. Leveling up consciousness, removing fear, it's just a journey. It's just a process, okay? So hopefully the way I think about this can help you get there sooner rather than later. Let me read this email for you. I want to reach out to hear your thoughts on whether or not you think it will continue to be safe living in the US for those who do not comply. I know Texas is better than most states, but I'm not convinced that certain freedoms will continue to be granted forever. Do you have a community of awake, free-thinking people around you who don't have to hide your real views from? And are you confident that you will be able to live on your own terms in the US? Look forward to hearing from you. I hope you and your family are safe, healthy, and standing in your truth. The first is the state. We could say Texas and Florida pretty much. Texas and Florida have built their brand on being bastions of freedom, right? That's what they've done. They've taken that stance, they've drawn that line in the sand, and now they're going to have to, because that's what politicians do, is they're going to have to stick to what they've said and done. I think Texas and Florida, if we got to a point where the whole US was acting extra crazy, there is a future possibility that a place like Texas might succeed from the United States. Florida, I don't know. I don't know if that's written in the Constitution or not. I believe the Texas state has written in the Constitution that they can succeed from the US at any time. So that's something that's pretty awesome. I just don't think we're going to go there. I think it's more likely we have the entire country breaking up into multiple parts, and maybe Texas is one of those places, maybe California and like New York, and we have these different territories or whatever. That's possible. If you look at the way things are going, that is very much a possibility. In that case, I'd want to be in a place like Texas or Florida. But again, at the same time, if these things happen, it's a long drawn out process. And that's really how to think about all governments. You should not be afraid of the state because they are these massive juggernauts that are extremely slow moving. We've already seen how some of the due process of law in the Constitution has gone into effect and protected Americans from further tyranny. And now you see the narrative breaking down because people are just fed up with it and they've lost grip on the narrative through 2 years of acting like complete and utter morons. Again, the state, the government, we're talking about a percent of a percent of the population that tries to tell the masses how to live. There's always more of the masses than there are of the few. The government should always be afraid of the citizenry. There's some good quotes on that. I believe that the US and specifically the state of Texas have already shown how things are going to go. And we've already had due process that has put a check on a lot of these things. And I think that's about as far as it's going to go. I think we're already now coming back from that. Now, what you're seeing, a more micro level, is different states like California doubling down, New York doubling down. But that's the beauty of the states having rights. And that's the beauty of what makes America really so amazing and successful to this point. Because you can leave a state like California, still be a US citizen, and go somewhere that's freer, like Texas, like Florida. This is free markets. This is how free markets work. If one company produces a bad product, which that's what municipal governments are, that's what state governments are, that's what even countries are. If they produce a bad product, you go somewhere else. And as more people go elsewhere, that state that's providing a bad product goes out of business, loses power. It's happening in real time, which is why people are fleeing from places like New York and California, which are just doubling down on their nonsense, which is what you get from Democrats and the left. And unfortunately, like whether you identify that way or not, the idea of being a Democrat based on collectivism and coercion and stealing from them to give to the others and based on a utopia that we should live in, it's all nonsense, right? It just is what it is, unfortunately. Republicans don't have it all figured out either, but they're at least a lot closer to truth. They're a lot closer to the reality that the state is corrupt. Every dollar that it steals from us through taxation and inflation and then spends is a complete misuse of resources and creates all the crazy misallocations of society. And it's why you have all the really bad things in the world today through the state and government and populations, whatever. It comes from the state mingling and the state believing it's the ultimate sovereign higher order that should tell humans how to live. That's not what the state is supposed to be. It's not what natural law is. And that's why they always corrupt. They always collapse. And the United States is no different. So that's Texas and the US. That's my opinion on that. If you're afraid of what may or may not happen in the future, then I would recommend you start working on that because the future doesn't exist. You'll never have it. All you can do though, if you want to prepare for the future, is to do just that. Is to freaking prepare. Once you prepare and you know what you've done and you have a good idea of what you're going to do. Now, again, it's easier to say this when you have some money and resources than when you don't. I totally understand that. Getting your passport, getting a little bit of Bitcoin, maybe a little bit of silver for your pocket, getting maybe some ammo, some extra food, things like that. Like, that's accessible to all of us if we stop spending money on stupid shit. So just do that. When you prepare, when you have an idea of what you're going to do, and if you leave early, if stuff goes really haywire, then you're fine. I reached that point probably about a year ago. I got my Bitcoin. I got a bunch of silver, ammo. We have extra resources, whatever. We were even living in the country for a while, but we moved back to the city for various reasons. It doesn't mean the city's the best, and it doesn't mean you're not at risk and you should still prepare. Yes. But I just don't think we're even close to some of the collapsing or the prepping nonsense or the supply chains breaking down. Like, we're not even close. In fact, the hyperinflation of the US dollar, when that variably comes to fruition, is going to be probably the worst thing. It's going to make the pandemic look like a freaking kiddie show, right? And this brings me to the next point, mobility. You do your preparation. Unlike prepping for having a bunch of resources and hunkering down in the woods, which is just not viable, because if you have resources and you don't have basically a small army to protect it, and you're living in a place like an hour outside of Austin, Texas, you better believe that all of those urbanites are going to spread across the vast plains and hills of Texas to then capture anything they can. I believe the better strategy is to not be landlocked. And this is where mobility comes in. You have your passports, you have Bitcoin that goes with you anywhere. It's the only thing on the planet that you can take all of your wealth with you. It's unbelievable. You go anywhere in the world, maybe Caribbean island, maybe Mexico. We're at the border in Texas, so we can literally drive to Mexico. We can fly to Mexico. I can even set aside money to fly private if I have to, or hire some dude with a Cessna to just like drive us over the border. There's ways to do it. If it gets to that point, you will find a way. And that is the ultimate protection. That is the sovereign individual thesis playing out. You will simply go to other jurisdictions, other countries, other places that will have you, that will gladly take your business. And the way the free market works, if a place like America starts collapsing because they go full-blown straight tyranny, then you better believe places like Mexico and other small Caribbean nations will gladly accept Americans. They'll probably update their visa requirements and like even give out citizenships here and there if you pay for it, because they'll look at it as a massive flux of customers. I don't believe that you will ever see the entire global ecosystem of every country on the planet simply say, nope, we're all going to do this one thing and we're all going to become completely tyrannical and that's it, done, end of humanity, you're all slaves now. Like, it's just not going to happen. So mobility is how you sleep at night. You get your mobility by getting your ducks in a row, Bitcoin, passport, maybe some physical resources, and then maybe some target locations like I got here. Mexico beaches, a lot of amazing places, Caribbean beaches, go live somewhere exotically amazing and like watch from your island as the world collapses around you if it gets to that point. I don't think it will, but if it does, you can always go somewhere else. What's more likely to happen is you'll see pockets of collapse, pockets of resistance, and you will see more of a dispersing of conflict rather than one massive global conflict again. And that's a lot of thanks to the nuclear arms and just the mutually assured self-destruction if big superpowers go at it. Nuclear in a way is kind of like Bitcoin. It disincentivizes large-scale conflict because everybody loses, whereas Bitcoin disincentivizes violence because you can't knock somebody on, because you can't invade a territory and take somebody's Bitcoin. Bitcoin lives up here, right? It's decentralized. Nobody can capture it. And they basically have to threaten you or kill you to get your keys. And even then, they may not get it, right? So it disincentivizes violence, which is why it came about right when it did at the 2009 financial collapse, and why it's going to move humanity into a more peaceful existence that is more about playing fair, removing the power from governments that can just print money at will, and bringing order in a decentralized, uncontrollable by any elite or individual or state way. That means we will all live better lives and we will get pretty much as close to utopia as possible at this, you could say, probably multi-100-year stage in human evolution. When you are fully mobile, you are then living the sovereign individual thesis. You can go anywhere in the world, you go where you're treated best. So maybe brush up on the options for that. There's a lot of resources and YouTube videos and guides. I mean, there's literally everything you could ever want on the internet. So do some research to whatever extent you need to sleep better at night. Now, the final thing I will say, do you have a community of awake, free thinking people around you that you don't have to hide your views from? Well, yeah, I curate that because I don't talk to people or have them in my life if they're not like that. And if they are, then we probably just filter ourselves out. Now, I'm not going out aggressively assaulting people with my ideas. And in certain social situations, I might be a little bit more open and less open. But I'm to the point where I literally call it a pandemic. I make fun of masks and mask wearing. I'm not going to necessarily do it to somebody that I just met to their face or whatever. They might be wearing it for, they just want to fit in, whatever. I get it. Maybe they don't even think it's saving them from anything and they're just like doing it. That's one thing. But if somebody asks my opinion on masks or asks me my opinion on COVID or asks me my opinion on vaccines, I'll be like, absolutely not. Am I taking an experimental drug from Big Pharma, which has historically paid out billions of dollars in damages for all of their malpractice and malfeasance and whatever else crap they've done? And the fact that everybody accepts that as normal and just follows along is an exact perfect example of how broken and brainwashed the masses really are. And I tend to self-select anyways because people that can't deal with my personality and aren't somewhat free thinkers or at least open-minded, we don't hang out with each other. Again, I have a small family, pretty much the head of the household, and we all think this way for the most part. I don't deal with the family issue of it, fortunately. I'm not saying that's easy, but at the end of the day, like, you can always lead with compassion and say, I understand where you're coming from. I understand why you have those thoughts. I'd hope you could understand where I'm coming from and understand mine as well. And that's it. Like, we don't have to talk about it. Let's just talk about something else. How about that? So if you're still afraid at this point, especially with the narrative crumbling around us on January 24th, 2022, then you just haven't done enough work. So you got to do more work. You got to get yourself prepared. You have to know what your options are. You have to formulate a little bit of a plan in your mind. And if you don't have the resources to do that just yet, then you better be saving every extra penny you have. And I really mean buying Bitcoin with that, and maybe have a little bit of silver and doing everything to cut expenses and buying assets and becoming as financially free and safe and protected as possible. You have to plan. Get the Better Human newsletter over at thebetterhuman.co. I'll see you in the next one.